All right, next up we're going to be talking about white balance. White balance is really important because it gets baked into your movie file. And it's just like picture style, so you want to get it right if you can, if you have time. It's one of these things, if you're running and gunning and you don't have time to get it perfect, that's all right, as long as you get it close. Because if you're way off, trying to fix it in post will take forever, especially if you're new to color correction or trying to remove a color cast. All right, so we got to talk about what is white balance. Basically, white balance is really simple. You're telling the camera what is white. With our eyes do it. Our brain actually probably does it just instantaneously. We go inside, outside. We could be under fluorescent lights. We could be under tungsten lights. We could be under daylight, cloudy, shade. Doesn't matter. Our eyes figure it out on the fly. But our camera, for the most part, can't do it automatically, even though it does have automatic white balance. And since we're not shooting raw and we can't change it super easy in post, it's really important to get it right in camera. So right now I am shooting this all in daylight. There's snow on the ground and light is actually reflecting off the snow. And actually the sun is back this way, so it's hitting the snow and kind of coming into my office window, which is actually a double pane kind of sliding door actually. So daylight is 5500 Kelvin. And you know, I could talk about Kelvin, but I don't really need to in this case because the Rebel line of cameras, you can't choose the Kelvin like you can with the upper end cameras like the Canon 5D Mark III, where you can actually dial in the exact color temperature that you want in terms of Kelvin. But the Rebel line does give you a couple different ways. One is with presets and another is with custom. So you can actually get the perfect white balance with using something like a gray card or a white card. So right now, what I want to do is kind of step through all the different color temperatures. And I'm going to be using daylight as my base. So right now I don't have any softboxes on. And what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to turn the softboxes on next. And these softboxes have fluorescent lights on them. They're actually better than this kind of fluorescent light. The ones that I've got on these softboxes are pretty expensive lights. And they're daylight balanced and they have what's called a high CRI index. Now, with compact fluorescents, like what I've got in here, they run cool, which is great. They use less energy, but that comes at a kind of a compromise because their color renditioning index, the quality of light in terms of colors that you see, like if you've ever been, probably one of the lowest CRI number light would be something like a metal halide light that you would see in a parking lot. And if you've ever looked at your car, let's say your car is normally blue and you're looking down at it under these parking lot lights, let's say, and you look down at it and your car looks green. It's not the right color. Well, it has a very low CRI index. These, you can get in different varieties. Usually the ones that you buy from the store are pretty cheap. Sometimes have a low CRI. I think they're getting better. The ones that I have in these softboxes have a high CRI, and basically what happens is to make them run so efficiently, don't use hardly produce any heat and use not that much current draw. They have, and the green spectrum, I'm not, and I don't know a whole bunch about light theory, but basically when you have a regular normal incandescent light or regular lamp, light bulb that you have in your house, it has pretty much even light throughout the entire spectrum. This one doesn't. It doesn't have energy across the whole spectrum like an incandescent does. It has basically a big spike on green. So sometimes you can get kind of a green bias with these lights. So let's go ahead and turn these lights on and maybe we'll see a slight green tint when I do it. Okay, now I've closed the shades, and I've turned on the soft boxes. I've got two soft boxes, one kind of right there and one right over there. And so right now I have kept the color temperature that I set custom to the outdoor light is still set that way. So the color temperature that you see right now should look a little bit different because these daylight balanced are not probably totally matched outside, but they're usually pretty close. And you probably notice that the fill light in the room has changed quite dramatically too. But let's go ahead now. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to actually use my gray card, and I'm going to get I use a custom white balance on these soft boxes and see how it changes. All right, now we've actually custom white balanced to a gray card using these soft boxes with the fluorescent lights in them. And I think you're going to notice it looks maybe a little bit cooler than it did before. All right, we're moving our way down the color spectrum. Where 5500 was a very cool light, now we're getting very warm. You can see my face is going warm, and I haven't color corrected for this bulb yet. These are incandescent bulbs that you find just in your household socket, come in clear or frosted like this one. And what's inside of here is like a coiled element. I believe it's tungsten. It might be something different today, versus other bulbs, but for the most part, I think they're all tungsten. And way back when Thomas Edison was, let's go ahead and light this up and see what this is. When Thomas Edison first was making his light bulb, you can see the color temperature of this is pretty close to that. He was modeling, because back then all they had was basically candles for reading. He wanted to match that first light to what the color temperature for a candle was. And a candle, from what I understand, is I think around 1800, 1850, I think Wikipedia says, for Kelvin. So he wanted to make something similar, and I think his first light bulbs were made out of carbon. And then later on, they started making them out of tungsten, the tungsten element. And the tungsten element is more like 3200 Kelvin. And the reason I'm going through all this stuff is you're going to find yourself in basically 3 situations. You can boil it down to 3. It makes it a lot easier for you. You're going to be in a room, let's go ahead and blow this out, with incandescent lights, and there's a really good preset for that in your Rebel line cameras. You just go to tungsten, because these have tungsten elements. Not only you might find these, but you might find halogens as well in a room. Halogens have a tungsten element, and I believe they're in halogen gas. Again, I'm not a grip gaffer or whatever. I'm getting a little bit too technical here, but basically this will also work really well for your tungsten setting. So now when you're in a situation where you're like in an office space and you've got tons of fluorescent tubes like this one, that's when you put it to like white fluorescent. In fact, this one says cool white on it. So these type of tube lights come in 2 different varieties though, and a lot of times what you'll find, it was just very frustrating, is you'll go into these situations where these bulbs will be intermixed. So you'll have some that are like 5000 Kelvin and some are like tungsten, 3200, and they'll be mixed up in the ceiling, which makes it even more difficult to white balance correctly. And that's where your gray card comes into play if you have time to set it up, because a lot of times when you don't have time, you can switch back between white fluorescent and tungsten and try to figure out which one is which one looks best on the screen, which has the most neutral blacks or grays, or look at the wall if the wall is white and see if the white looks white, and when you switch back between the other ones. Now with the presets, going back outside, there's other presets. There's cloudy and shade and regular daylight. Actually, before I explain that, let me go ahead and switch this so I am color corrected temperature-wise correctly. All right, so now I have used the gray card to custom white balance for this light and to get it correct. And you'll see my skin looks a bit better, and it feels a bit probably bluer from that very warm image we had earlier. So basically, just to recap in terms of the presets, you really have to only worry about maybe 3. Because I've found that the automatic white balance works so well outside on these Canon cameras, you really don't need to go to cloudy or shade. You can just pretty much keep it in automatic white balance when you're outside, at least in Colorado. I don't know, maybe you're in Seattle, you might want to go to shade or cloudy if you have lots of clouds, for instance. But usually in Colorado, the Canon cameras work extremely well. So that would be your first one, automatic white balance outside. It's a great place to start. If it doesn't look warm enough or doesn't look correct, try one of the other outdoor settings. And then for indoor, you've got fluorescent. Go to white fluorescent. Try that. If it's not a white fluorescent bulb and it's more of a tungsten fluorescent bulb, try tungsten, see if that looks good. And then obviously if you're just got regular household lights, try tungsten. So now the next thing, the most difficult thing, is when the colors mix. So let's say you have a mixture of outdoor light. If I were to open up my my blinds and I were to mix this light with the outdoor light, that's when you really need to custom white balance. You just can't use the presets. All right, now I'm going to step through all the different presets that you have with your Rebel line of camera. And as our control, we're going to start off with daylight. And right now I have no lights on in the room, just sun coming in through the window here with the light bouncing off the snow. So what we're going to do first is, and I've custom white balanced it to this, so this is our control. So now we're going to work our way through the different presets. Okay, this is the daylight preset, daylight. All right, this is the shade, and you can see it got warmer. All right, this is cloudy. All right, this is tungsten, and you can see it got blue. So normally when you have a tungsten light at 3200 and you want to make it bluer because it's already so warm. So since we're already on daylight, it's going to get even bluer. All right, this is fluorescent, a little bit warmer than the tungsten, and you can see it's just a little, it's still on the cool side. Because again, we're comparing this to natural daylight as our control. Just for kicks, this is flash, which looks very much like a tungsten light. All right, now we're back to custom white balance for just daylight. No other lights are in the room. And I want to give you a few hints and tricks for custom white balance. Even though I'm not going to go show you how to custom white balance since we've already done that in a previous chapter, I want to give you a few tricks and hints. The first one is in Canon's manual. When you look through the viewfinder and you see kind of that spot meter circle in the middle, basically all you have to do to get a proper white balance is to fill just that portion of the frame. So if I put this right in the middle of the frame like I am, and that's all you need, is just right in the middle. You don't have to fill the frame. It just has to be in that spot meter center of the frame. The next item is, it doesn't need to be in focus. I can be wildly out of focus. It doesn't really matter. Exposure wise, it kind of does matter, because if you're like 2 or 3 stops off, you want to get your exposure set right first and then set your white balance on the gray card. Or you can use the gray card to actually get the exposure first and then do it. And like I said before, if I didn't say it before, you can use white, but Canon recommends gray as being more accurate. A couple of other things is, what you want to do is, my light source is pretty much this direction. It's not towards, the light is not coming right over the camera or behind the camera. It's coming from that direction. You don't want to take your gray card and basically point it towards the light source. You want to point it, angle it pretty much right at the camera. And that'll give you the most accurate, not only exposure, but it'll give you the most accurate white balance as well. A couple other things, if you're in a pinch and you don't have one of these do fold up really small. You could, fit them in your pocket, and they don't take up any room in terms of your camera bag. You can use paper, an envelope like this, or regular paper, but what I found with these is they try to make this look a little bit whiter. And what they do is they usually add a chemical or something into there has a slight bit of blue in it. So using that won't give you the most accurate, but if you're in a pinch, a piece of paper, white piece of paper, will definitely work. So over the years, I've noticed, and it didn't take too long, I would say maybe 6 months to a year, after doing so many custom white balances, you'll look through the viewfinder and you'll look at the gray and you'll say, ooh, it looks cool or it looks warm. It looks too blue or it looks too orange, or it looks too green or it looks too magenta. After a while, you're train your eye. If you do it enough, you'll train your eye, and you'll actually be able to sometimes actually just take the Kelvin, which we don't have in the Rebel line of cameras, but you could actually take the Kelvin control and dial it pretty much to eye and be pretty close. So you'll be surprised how fast your eye learns what a neutral gray is. There's lots of things, in terms of video that I've trained my eye for. I never saw moire before. Well, I did, but maybe on a subconscious level, but, now it annoys me and I don't like to have moire. Same thing with training your eye to what, neutral gray is like. You'll get better at it over time. So the next thing I want to talk about is if you don't have time to do this, a lot of times you're going to be like, Dave, I'm running a gun and I just don't have time to put a gray card in the frame. to get the right one. So let's say you've dialed it into whatever you think is closest, tungsten, fluorescent light, daylight, automatic white balance, whatever. But you do at the end of the shoot have time to put this in the frame. So you've already gotten yourself somewhat close, but you can get yourself even closer and save yourself a ton of work in post by, let's say you're done with the shoot or whatever you've done, just pull this out, put it in the frame. The actors or whatever you're doing, the interview, you're done. You just put this in the frame. You could be in the frame with it. It doesn't matter. And this will be a reference. So when you're in your nonlinear editor, you can take your eyedropper tool or whatever and click it on what's neutral, and it'll help get you closer to removing whatever color cast you might have in the image. So basically, in a nutshell, use your presets. When you'd want to use custom white balances in a situation where, let's say, like for fluorescent lights, you can dial in the preset, but you might have a green tint. But when you work with a gray card, it will get you exactly where you want to be, because there's two different things when it comes to custom white balance. There's the blue to, or cool to warm look, the blue to, like, let's say orange, that type of push and pull. And then there's also the green to the magenta, that type of push pull. Most of the time when you're dealing with lights, you only have to deal with the blue to warm. But sometimes, depending on the lights or whatever is going on, to make it as correct as you can, use custom white balance and you will get both of those done at the same time. All right, that's pretty much it for white balance.